Welcome, everyone. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something that I think really highlights resilience and enduring tradition.
hmm
Our mission today is to sort of unpack the current picture, the landscape of traditional Latin Mass communities. That's the TLM in the Philippines.
Right.
And we're drawing from some really good sources here, especially www.epistles.online. They've put together a very detailed list of these communities. It's our main source today.
And it's important to set the scene. We're looking at a pretty challenging time for the TLM there.
Yeah.
You've got the impact of the recent pandemic, obviously, but also the Traditionis Custodes document.
That papal directive, yeah.
Exactly, which, well, it placed new restrictions on celebrating the traditional Latin Mass.
Mhm.
And sadly, that's led to almost half the places where the Tridentine Mass used to be regularly celebrated closing down.
Wow, nearly half. That's a huge impact.
It really is.
But, and this is where it gets fascinating, despite all that, despite these trials, the flame of that tradition, it hasn't gone out.
Mhm.
Not at all.
No, quite the opposite in some ways.
Right. By the grace of God, as the source puts it, and really through the continued support and crucially the permissions from local ordinaries.
The bishops.
So local bishops, exactly. Several diocesan TLM locations are still active. They're like these quiet but really powerful witnesses to the beauty and reverence of the Old Rite. So what does this resilience actually look like, on the ground?
Well, what's really striking is how these communities, even though there are fewer of them now, they're not just, hanging on. In many cases, they seem to be thriving.
Thriving, really?
Yeah, it speaks volumes about the dedication of the faithful involved. And many of them, they really attribute their survival, their growth even, to, well, divine help and that absolutely vital support from their local bishops.
You can almost feel that strong connection they have to their heritage. So let's maybe dig into some specific examples from our source, www.epistles.online. Kicking things off with the Traditional Latin Mass Society of Tagbilaran in Bohol.
Ah, Bohol.
And the source actually notes that this province, Bohol, is often seen as, well, exceptionally traditional, very serious about its worship and Catholic practice.
That's a significant observation.
Yeah.
Then if we move further south, you find the Latin Mass Society of Davao,
Davao, okay.
which just shows, this devotion isn't confined to one area. It spans the islands.
Right across the archipelago.
Right.
And then over in the eastern Visayas.
There you have the Traditional Latin Mass Society in the Diocese of Maasin, Southern Light, another example of this perseverance.
It really is a testament. Back near the capital in Metro Manila.
We find communities like the Hermandad de la Sagrada Eucharistia, that's in Muntinlupa.
Okay, Muntinlupa. And also in the metro area.
The Novaliches EF SOCOM, that's in Novaliches, Quezon City. Still very active.
It's good to hear. Now, what about Cebu? The source mentions something specific there.
Ah, yes, the Latin Mass Archdiocese of Cebu community. It's an interesting case. The source points out there isn't currently a public TLM schedule available.
Oh.
But, and this is key, their community is apparently still very active on Facebook. So they're keeping that connection live online, fostering the community digitally.
That's adapting, isn't it? Then we also have the Latin Mass community of Bacolod over in Negros Occidental.
Maintaining its presence, yes. And in Iloilo province,
Ah, yes.
the Confraternity of Our Lady of Lourdes, that's in Banate, Iloilo.
Chinate. Got it. And finally, up north.
The faithful also gather at the Baguio Cathedral of Our Lady of the Atonement.
Wow. So Bohol, Davao, Leyte, Manila, Cebu, Bacolod, Iloilo, Baguio. It's really, really compelling to see these lights, you could say, still shining across the Philippines.
Absolutely. And the communities themselves, the source, emphasizes their deep gratitude, first to God, but also very much to their local bishops for, well, allowing these traditions to continue and even thrive under their care.
Yeah, you get the sense they see this as like safeguarding a real spiritual treasure.
A fount of graces, as some would put it, something that nourishes souls, which actually brings up an important point that often comes up in these discussions. It's about perspective. For those who feel drawn to the traditional Latin Mass, the advice often given, and it's wise advice, is not to condemn the Novus Ordo Mass itself.
Right, the standard Mass celebrated today.
Exactly. You might rightly critique maybe abuses or irreverence that can sometimes happen around the Novus Ordo celebration.
Two specific instances.
But condemning the actual rite itself, that's something to avoid. It's really vital for, charity and unity within the wider church, maintaining that balance.
That's a really crucial point for fostering understanding. Okay, so let's maybe start to wrap up. We've seen this frankly, surprising resilience of TLM communities across the Philippines.
despite significant headwinds.
Absolutely. And we've seen the absolutely vital role their local bishops play in allowing these traditions to carry on.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, well, what does it tell us? In a world that's changing so fast, this kind of steadfast devotion to a liturgical rite that's centuries old, it perhaps points to something deep in us, you know?
Hmm.
A human need for stability, for the sacred, for that connection to spiritual heritage.
A connection across time. That's a powerful thought. So, for you, our listener, if you want to explore these communities in more detail, or maybe understand the context of the traditional Latin Mass in the Philippines better,
Mm-hmm.
we really encourage you. Visit www.epistles.online. That's epistles like letters in the Bible, .online. It's the original source for all the detailed info we discussed today.
It's a great resource.
And you can also find more discussions like this on the Catholic Epistles podcast channel. We're on major podcast platforms aiming for, Catholics with balanced views, not leaning too far one way or the other, neither overly traditional nor modernist.
Try to find that middle ground.
Exactly. Because these surviving communities, they aren't just dots on a map. They really represent something profound, a spiritual continuity that's still very much alive and shaping lives today.